It does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty.
Actually, very thoughtful. They're just sort of gone through a filter of these kind of teenage dum-dums.
Yeah, totally.
When someone kicked their shoe off and hit Ty in the back of the head, who the fuck's high school experience is this?
Amanda.
Yes.
Anime or anime?
Anime. I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going.
You find out his last name is Birkenstock.
Yeah. What are you doing?
He's a vampire wizard, I swear to God.
Inconceivable.
Welcome to the Yestalgia podcast. I'm Basil.
I'm Drew.
And I'm Amanda.
And today we're going to be talking about Clueless. Quick summary. Cher Horowitz is a pretty, rich, and popular, although shallow, sophomore at Beverly Hills. After a successful attempt at matchmaking her uptight debate teacher, Cher, along with her best friend Dion, take new girl Ty under their wing and make her over to find her the perfect match. However, Cher's own love life is a bit more messy, and the rest we will chat about. What is everyone's experience? This was I think, kind of a seminal film in my life. It came out when I was a little bit young, to be honest, so I don't think I saw it in theaters. I definitely remember watching the show that came afterwards. But yeah, it had a lot of influence, I think, when I was fairly young and kind of going into my teen years.
How many times have you seen the film?
I could not tell you because I've watched it whenever not whenever, but I've watched it multiple times when it was just being played on TV. So I don't even know. Many times, I'll say. Not in a long time. Until this most recent time, I hadn't seen it in at least 10 years.
Drew?
Yeah, I've seen this movie in the periphery many years ago, one time. And then now, 2 hours ago, I watched it. So yeah, I'm new to this one.
Kind of sort of a mix between y'all two. I have seen the movie shortly after it was released to television. It was the one and only time that I actually sat down and watched it. This was one of those movies that I was just I don't know if I was the target age demographic for this movie. I think I might have been. If I wasn't, I was just barely too young. Just barely. I'm not going to say numbers, but I remember being adamantly against watching this movie. It did not interest me. I was expecting it to be just a shit show. I was expecting so much internalized misogyny. I didn't want any part of it. But I sat down and watched it. I was at a slumber party with my sister and our friends and watched the whole thing. And I didn't remember, I could not tell you a single scene of the movie until I watched it a few days ago. But I remember being somewhat pleasantly surprised. I was oh, that was good. And then I watched it for the whole second time for this podcast.
Is there anything anyone wants to touch on specifically at the outset, or?
I was going to say, I'm the youngest of our three co-hosts here. And I was thinking, as I was watching the movie, this is probably more up you guys' lane. Because I will say numbers, I was 4 when this came out. So definitely wouldn't have been for me. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it is more my kind of thing as someone who is kind of femme. In general, I'm going to be completely honest. Upon this watching, I don't really care for it anymore. I can talk about some of the reasons why if you want.
Either you do or I do.
Okay, let me start with the thing I find. The movie is meant to be satirical. I understand that. But they make some jokes that are not cool to laugh about. Particularly I've noticed a couple times they made some body dysmorphia or disordered eating kind of jokes that I did not care for. That made me kind of upset, actually, in particular because this was directed by a woman and a woman spearheaded this project. So I was especially disappointed by them using that kind of thing in a way that was supposed to be skewering Valley Girls, essentially.
Right. Also, there was an element of whiplash. Whiplash is a great word for me to use to describe my feelings towards this entire movie in general. But what was with, to your point, the whole slight preoccupation with eating and dieting and, oh, my physical trainer is going to show up early in the morning. All I had for lunch was 2 Snickers and a handful of M&Ms. And basically it was just a bunch of candy.
Yeah.
Are you concerned or are you not?
I think, like I said, it is making reference to like disordered eating. But like, I'm not sure if it knew it was doing that sometimes.
Yeah, it had like a net zero effect on the story, on like even the joke itself. It was just sort of like it fizzled out, as so many things in this movie I feel did.
To be fair, it was the mid-90s. People weren't as woke in that time. And it actually kind of surprised me when Dion mentioned the politically acceptable phrase for something. Like, I didn't really know that politically accepted stuff was a thing in the early to mid-90s.
I mean, yeah, for sure, because I think that was kind of a turning point for like liberalism and leftism in general, like was in the 90s. And we were seeing a smaller version, I would say, of what we kind of see now, where there's a big pushback against people who kind of want to keep things the way they normally are.
Yeah, I appreciated Cher's sort of left-ish approach, her debate in one of the early scenes of the movie. And I used the word debate loosely.
Yeah.
I did love it when she said, if the government could just get to the kitchen. And probably the best line of all, it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty. I did love that subversion of little rich debutante, white girl. Yes. But, then 30 minutes later, she drops the R word. So
Right. We're not quite fully liberal yet.
Yeah. And it wasn't the only time they said it. They said it later, too, in the movie. Well, they said it with the first half missing.
He was being such a...
But to the point of the debate, actually, I thought it was kind of interesting. There's two things I wanted to touch on with that, where not only Cher, but even sometimes Travis, like sometimes they'll say things that are like, they are actually very thoughtful. They're just sort of gone through a filter of these kind of teenage dum-dums. Not dum-dums, that's so mean, but like they are like deeper thoughts. They are like generally thoughtful things. They're just, like filtered through this teenage thought process. So they're said in a way that seems dumb, but is at its heart not.
No, absolutely.
And then the second thing was, I did think it was interesting. So I don't know, like a little while ago, there was sort of like a bimbo feminist thing going on where like being ultra femme, talking high with that inflection that people hate and
yeah, totally.
Seeming dumb, but saying these things and talking about like feminism and misogyny, etc. And when I was watching the movie, it sort of reminded me of that, where, like I said, like because things are being filtered in through their lens, they kind of sound dumb, but there is something behind a lot of that.
Yeah, we're getting actually two filters going on in this movie, one of which is the 90s, the mid-90s, and the other is there's a developmental filter, I guess, of them just being ding-dong 15-year-olds.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting to have the characters at that age. And I think it works. So I mentioned this before to you guys off podcast that it is based around the book Emma by Jane Austen. And I do think it was an interesting take in Emma. Emma is sort of this... So she's into matchmaking. She's kind of naive in certain ways, though, right? But she is, I believe, supposed to be older. Whereas I think by making your character younger, it explains a lot of where these kind of misinformed ideas are coming from, because she has not a lot of experience and wisdom yet. So some of the things she says or does are clearly misinformed.
Or it sometimes sort of seems like she's kind of like trying to be an asshole a little bit. Like she's just trying to be coy and she's trying to be sassy, which is all good and fine and fun. But yeah, it can be interpreted as being an idiot. There were a lot of scenes in that movie with Cher in particular where I was like, this seems like something my toddler would say. Like this seems like an attitude my little sassy ass toddler would have. Just trying to be independent and mature, and she's not doing herself any favors. I will say, though, Cher is extremely cute. I had whiplash throughout the entire movie.
Silverstone.
Like, yes, she is extremely precious. She is probably the only actor in this whole movie that I would believe is 15, but only if you like really twisted my arm up my back. That was one level of whiplash that I had with film. Mm-hmm. And it's so crazy to me because during this time period that this movie was made, that was just the way it was. Oh, do we need, we're we've got a 14-year-old character. We're going to use this 24-year-old actor.
It's still that way, less so, but still kind of
less so. There's a lot of think about.
I mean, Stranger Things. They
I was going to mention
kids
that
and stuff, but
Stranger Things, some of the later X-Men movies.
But the problem with Stranger Things is because they all started aging before they were. Now they're more like
exactly.
They're more like the way normally it's cast. However, they were also a little bit older. Like all the older teenagers, so like Nancy and Jonathan and Steve were in their 20s playing teenagers. So like it's not that different.
Right. That gave me quite a bit of whiplash. Also, there were some points in this movie where it was just so busy. And I don't know a better word to describe it. It was just so damn busy where I was like, what am I watching? Like there was way, way, way too much going on. For example, like the party scene. It was very funny. I laughed when someone kicked their shoe off and hit Ty in the back of the head. And then she sat up and hit her head on the light fixture. I laughed at that, but also I was completely sort of like unimmersed. The use of sort of slapstick comedy, it seemed out of place. God, what was another scene? Didn't she fall down the stairs or something? It was always with Ty. It was always with Brittany Murphy. I know she got down over the rail at the mall, which is like my one of my probably top 10 nightmares.
It was like, why would she even get up there?
Right? What the fuck happened? Then we were at the other party with
Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah. The party with Christian.
That was so easy to see for me. I don't know why I said that.
I was saying that too. And it's interesting because like I attribute that a little to Cher's age as well. Like there's a lot of things where you're like, oh, this is very likely because she's so young. But I actually wrote down all the instances which they were trying to tell us that he was gay.
He first showed up in the class.
Like one of the early scenes when you like first see him, he is reading this book called Junkie by William S. Burroughs. And in it is sort of, I mean, this is sort of a simplification of it, but it does sort of involve like a homosexual relationship as like part of the core of the story. And there's a couple times, I think, when people are reading books where it's trying to say something, I believe.
Seeing to their true nature.
Yeah. And just the scene at the party where they're dancing, like, and he's clearly hitting on the bartender. And then when Cher is not dancing with him, he's only dancing with other guys.
Yeah. I mean, Murray knew.
Yeah, that's true. Murray, I have such mixed feelings about Murray.
Yeah.
Because, like, sometimes he kind of fucking sucks. And they imply that he cheats on Dion, like, several times. But then he says things sometimes that are, like, he seems very insightful and, like, he's an odd character.
Yeah, he was shaving his hair because his friend had shaved hair.
Yeah. And actually, when we were talking about the ages, I believe Donald Faison was the youngest actor and was like around 17 or 18 at the time of filming. So he was actually still basically a teenager.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that surprising. The scene, okay, and this is what I'm talking about with Whiplash. The scene where Dion is driving with all of them and he was giving me anxiety. Like, woman do this.
That's realistic though.
But then she nearly gets them all killed. And as soon as they're out of danger, he was like, that was okay. You did so good. That was great. Hey, don't worry. I was just like,
I thought that was good. He was super excited and anxious, of course, because she was almost got them killed. But in the end, they were fine. And he was calming her down. And that was one of the points where he was actually being a good boyfriend, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know. A lot of this movie was hard for me to swallow. I kind of felt the same way with the dad. I had very, very like ambivalent feelings towards the dad. On the one hand, I was like, he's shouting at the dinner table. He's telling people not to take phone calls. But then as soon as his phone rings, which that, by the way, was fucking hilarious. Like his phone ringing and all three of them, the brother and Cher and the dad, all picking up their phones at the same time. And then the disappointment when it's the dad's phone. I found that to be like, that would be a modern day boomer joke. But to just wrap up about the dad, there was that. And there was this sort of like, he also kind of gave me anxiety where he was just like always kind of bitching. But then toward the end of the movie where she was like, there's a guy and I don't think he likes me. And he's like, that's fucking stupid. You're the best. And I don't want you to be with someone who doesn't also think you're the best. I was like, oh,
Yeah. Well, I think with his character, of all of the characters, I think, well, Cher kind of is too, but I think for him, he is the most sort of satirical caricature of
Right.
someone.
He's the over busy businessman slash lawyer
Yeah.
whose work is more important than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But he also has time occasionally, even if it's just to scold her, for his daughter. So
Yeah.
I'm getting the feeling, I mean, very good feeling, that I like this movie more than you did, Amanda.
you probably do.
Yeah, I think it's particularly interesting because, so in Emma, to be fair, I have not actually read Emma. I have seen 2 adaptations, and I believe I've heard that the 2021 one is fairly accurate to the book. Except without the kissing, because like in that time, nobody was kissing. But in Emma, I'm pretty sure her dad is like on the older side and like has some possibly fake ailments. And so like, I think they, to try and kind of, like I said, it's not meant to be like 1-to-1, obviously, of Emma, clearly. But I do think that that's where some of their relationship comes from, or where it's influenced by, and particularly where there's a couple times where Cher is like trying to take care of him, you know, and not letting him eat, you know, quote unquote fatty foods for his cholesterol or whatever. I just thought that was interesting. Also, consider the Dion scene. I'm Dion on the highway. I hate driving on the highway. I'm so scared of the highway. I've driven on it twice and almost had a meltdown both times.
I can understand that. I've lived my entire life by the highway, and I moved and there is no true highway. And I understand now why people trip and freak out. But yeah, I felt so bad for her because she got onto the freeway by accident. The whole time her man is cussing her out and just shouting her down. And absolutely, like, it's sort of like when someone's flipping out and you're like, calm down. Like, when has that ever helped anybody, number one?
But when you're panicking in the moment, you can't really fully think that through.
When you're about to die.
Right.
I think that's where it's coming from, where like, because Cher was freaking out too, like where you are scared now because the highway can be scary.
Well, but to my point, though, it isn't like he just started like bitching her out and kind of like talking to her briskly or in a rude way or whatever, right then and there when they were having the highway meltdown. It was a theme that was sort of presented throughout the whole movie that they were just nagging at each other, both of them.
Like, it is very likely in that story they should have broken up. They may have loved each other, but they probably shouldn't be together. You know what I mean?
I think of it like this. Whenever there's a character in a piece of media where you're like, if I removed this character, would it change anything? I felt like there was at least a few characters like that in this movie, him included. The redheaded girl with the braids is another one. I was just sort of
Amber.
like, Amber, thank you. I was like, this is adding so much static to this movie. There was so much going on.
Yeah.
I know.
However, there is a name for those kind of characters, side characters.
Yeah. But like,
I mean, I guess it can be excessive, but it isn't really a movie if you just have the main characters. It's like, what else is going on in the world? It's like, you're just maintaining your story to these handful of characters. It's more boring if you don't have at least some side characters.
well, and I think that sometimes they are given screen time in a way where it seems like they'll be important. I think maybe is part of the problem with that. And then they're not. You know what I mean? Like when there are like very specific scenes with Cher kind of combating with Amber,
Right.
or, you know, Murray shows up a few times for a long period of time and then has no consequence on the story. And I'm not going to try and be an asshole, but it does seem like particularly Murray is a character that is there for tokenism at the time. And I don't care for that, to be honest.
His introductory ass shot, I was like, come on.
Yeah, it did seem like it was trying to do something that it was not exactly successful at.
I know what you're trying to get at, but honestly, I don't know how to put it in words.
Yeah. So there's a lot of the characters, I'll say, in the movie that are a 1-to-1 representation of characters in Emma. However, Dion and Murray are not. They're the only ones that I can, well, not the only ones, but they are not. And a couple times, there'll be characters mashed together a little bit. And I think maybe that is what Dion and Murray's role in the story is meant to be, like a kind of a mashup of all these side characters. And that might be why they are given, well, not Dion. Dion has a much bigger part of the story, obviously, but like Murray in particular is given a lot of emphasis in the scenes in which he is in.
You could take Dion out, but it would take a lot more unnecessary work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think she a lot of times creates an interesting sort of counterpart to Cher's naivety, because I think she is clearly less naive, especially in kind of a romantic sense, than Cher is.
Cher's got some hot takes, though.
Yeah, sometimes.
What was her second debate? It was towards the very end of the movie. The first one was, should refugees be allowed into America? And her just smoking hot ass take is, it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty. But what was the second debate that she had?
I don't remember.
That's the problem with this movie.
Yeah, Drew, you watched it more recently. Do you know what it was?
Can't say that I do. Those parts were like the least disappointing for me, because they were just like middle scenes between.
I think the first one is pretty integral in terms of like how she becomes a matchmaker. Yeah. Because like that's the thing, Emma doesn't otherwise translate, into modern times. Like, so like matchmaking was like a big thing in the Regency era, and everybody wanted to be married. It was very important. So they had to find a way to kind of get into like, why does Cher do these matchmaking things?
She was getting her jollies. I'm glad you said that, because another thing that kept nagging at me with this movie was, I was sitting here watching this movie and I'm going, who the fuck's high school experience is this? Like, am I the outlier? Am I the fucking weirdo that had like this divergent high school experience? Like, who is going around? There is not a person that exists. Cher is not a person who exists in the world as we know it. Like, nobody plays matchmaker. Like, literally none of these kids make any damn sense to me. And I'm kind of sad, because I'm like, I wish that Cher was a real extant person, because I need her services. Please and thank you.
So I think part of that is because a lot of the characters are more caricatures,
Sure.
rather than real people. So they're supposed to be like, because there's even that part, which I think they actually skewer in Mean Girls, where it's sort of pointing out the cliques. So there is a part where Cher is doing that. And it is an indication of like how everyone is this sort of stereotype of some sense, which I think is what I meant by the whole like quote unquote tokenism, where it is meant to be a stereotype, if that makes sense. Just like the burnouts are meant to be a stereotype, or like the cool kids I say Valley, but they're not in the Valley. That would be very offensive. Yeah, but they would consider that pretty offensive. But that kind of bimbo-y thing, right? Like, so everything is supposed to be this sort of cartoonish version of real life, if that makes sense. Which is why you might not have connected to this experience in high school.
So I have never read Emma. I didn't even know it was a thing until the other day. Like, I had no idea that Clueless was based off of this Jane Austen novel. So obviously I never read it, but for the purposes of this podcast, I did Wikipedia it. And I will say, I thought it was going to be more obscure, but it was a pretty, like, the parallels are very clear to me between the book summary. Like, it listed out all the characters in the novel and what their function was. And I was pretty much able to go down the list and be like, oh, that's this person, that's this person, that's this person. Let's please talk about Paul Rudd.
In general, or that they end up together?
There's so much. I feel like this is the elephant in the room.
I was going to ask, in Emma, does the main character end up with her brother?
He is not her stepbrother in Emma. So yes, functionally he is Mr. Knightley in Emma. But in Emma, he is her sister's husband's brother. And they also were neighbors, so they've known each other for a very long time. And I'm like, why didn't you keep it kind of like that? I don't understand. Yeah.
They actually made it worse.
Oh, for sure. They made it so bad. I feel like it's totally acceptable when it's technically your brother-in-law, right? But like, it's really just somebody you've grown up with. That's fine. There's nothing really wrong with that. There is actually, I believe, a comment in the book about it where he says we're not really brother and sister.
Right. They aren't in the movie either, but they're closer.
Yeah.
So why make them closer in the movie?
I was harkened back to so many bad animes with Paul Rudd's character. What is his name?
Josh.
And Cher's relationship, where I was just like, I've seen way too many animes where the characters say over and over again, well, he's not my real brother. Like, I get it, but stop it.
Well,
Amanda.
Yes.
Anime or anime?
Anime.
Because I know some anime like that too, but
no, but even in the stuff that's tame.
I was watching this movie and I thought to myself, I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going.
But even outside of that, they do that kind of plot in like where it's strictly romantic and not explicit. But yeah, like you would think it was because they were trying to stick to it still wouldn't even make sense if it was them trying to stick to the book because it doesn't do a very good job of sticking to it. So then
I guess maybe they're trying to make it less complicated.
Yeah.
A bit.
I think part of it is to explain why he's like hanging around all the time. But all you had to do was say that he was looking to become a lawyer. He was like their neighbor that they
could have been the dog's intern.
Yeah, well, their age gap is also kind of a problem.
We'll get to that.
But yeah, he could have been an intern. He could have just been a neighbor who they were very close to and wanted to become a lawyer and maybe was in college. I don't know. Like I said about the age. But, you know, and therefore was sort of being mentored by Mel. But no, he's her stepbrother, which means at some point they lived as brother and sister.
Right. I also found it kind of humorous, not in a way the movie wanted me to. Did you guys get the vibe that they were trying to make Josh, who's supposed to be what, like 20, 21?
I think 18.
Oh, really?
I think he's supposed to have just...
Well, he's a freshman.
Yeah, he's
He's a freshman in college.
This person
so it's like 18, 19, early 20. But 19 is the real... Because depending on if you follow the European tradition of gap year, then he would definitely be 19.
Well, and I know I would have been 18 when I started college, so.
Let's see, I was 17 when I went to college. Brag. Anyways, I felt like they were trying to make Josh out to be like old man, ha ha ha. Like he keeps trying to say like, that would be dope. You know what I mean? Like he kept trying to like emulate the way that Cher and Dion and Brittany Murphy all talked every now and then. And I was like, come on, he's fresh as fuck. Like,
yes, I'm down, fellow teens.
Yeah. They tried to make him like, hello, fellow teens, that kind of thing.
I think he was meant to be making jokes when he did that, but maybe I'm incorrect about that.
I mean, I think he was, but even still.
It's not a good joke. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would be like if I saw a 17-year-old walk up to a 16-year-old and be like, that's fresh as fuck, dog. Like, okay.
That is not the slang of today's teens, by the way. Just so you know. Speaking on the topic of Josh, it was interesting because they used certain markers without... It's still done with dialogue and plot. However, they also did certain markers to kind of be like, Josh is a good person and Josh is thoughtful about other people. And in part of that, I would say is because like the first time we see him, he is wearing an Amnesty International shirt. So like it's already like there are a lot of visual markers. I mean, I could talk about the clothes in this for a long time, but I'm not sure if you guys are interested in that. But yeah, he is wearing something that is supposed to be like, look at what a good person I am, which to be fair is not subtle or anything, but it is using kind of visual language to say like this person is a quote unquote good person.
He's woke AF, kids.
Well, and that is supposed to be the general idea. Like, and what were him and the girl who was also in college talking about in the car, where that was also sort of an indication about him being like generally a more like thoughtful person?
Something about Hamlet.
Was it?
Yeah, and then Cher corrects the girl, or like thinks she's correcting the girl.
Yeah,
So it was just because of the quote, though. I think the quote was in regards to the topic they had been talking about. I don't even remember.
Right. I don't remember the topic either.
I can't. Whoops. Shouldn't have brought it up. No, but I do think that was like supposed to be another thing, being like, this is a person who's very thoughtful. And it also at that scene is because Cher corrects her. It's supposed to be like, Cher is not technically an idiot. She's just a little inexperienced. She's a little bit that toxic positivity thing, right?
She's the Ouroboros eating its own tail.
But like, like toxically positive people, everyone knows someone that's like that, right? And she's kind of that.
Yeah, I would have loved if her whole end of the movie sequence of I want to be a better person was motivated by internal reasons other than in order to impress my somehow ex-stepbrother.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a certain amount of it that is because it has to do with like Thai and the change that's happening with everyone being really into Thai as well, where she kind of has to look beyond her own popularity.
I guess. I was frustrated by this movie. I will say that. I watched Mean Girls for the first time about 4 years ago. So it was not new. Mean Girls had been out for quite some time. And I remember avoiding Mean Girls for the exact same reason that I avoided Clueless back in the day. I was afraid that it was just going to be a huge pile of shit and it was going to be all over the bottom of my shoes and I was going to be tracking it all into my inner sanctum. But when I watched Mean Girls, I was like, hell yeah, okay, I'm here for this shit. Good flick, good flick. Let's wrap it up. Great job. But when I watched Clueless, I was just like, you're not bad, but you're so not good. Like, what happened?
I'll say that, like, I think that in Mean Girls, they're actually trying to say something. And I don't know that that's what's happening in Clueless.
Is that why I'm unhappy? Because I'm expecting, like, an answer and there is none?
Maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
Kind of think it's just they're telling a story to tell a story, not really with any meaning behind it. It's just something to get people in the seats and watch the movie. I mean, of course, like you said, it's based on a book, so there's that running in it. But overall, it's just a story about some teenage kids and a bit of time in their lives. And that's all there is to it. Not really any deep meaning.
Well, yeah, I would, because like, I think in Emma, some of it has to do with like her learning, like kind of what an asshole she was. And also like that she was wrong about certain things in her life. And it's not like that doesn't happen in Clueless. It just doesn't have the weight that it does, I think, in Emma. I do want to say, as long as nobody cares that I pivot a little bit, I sort of mentioned something about this, like the clothing is kind of a big deal, right? Like it is such a big thing in the cultural zeitgeist, but it also, like I said, they use it as a visual language. So I think the best thing about this is the costume designer.
Her little yellow thing. I want that.
She has a wardrobe program at the beginning where it flips through and she can make a plan. I want
it. Wardrobe program.
How she get that?
I want that. I wish I had that. That's incredible.
Hey, I don't need that, but I know many people who do.
But yeah, like I do think it's interesting because like I did read a little bit about the costume designer's sort of approach to it, where even though both, because Dion and Cher are supposed to be kind of, a little bit spoiled rich girls, right? So their clothes, they're not all designer. There's some designer things in their like wardrobes, but a lot of it is kind of mall clothes because they're girls that like to hang out at the mall. And then, well, it wasn't then. It was a little bit better back in the day. But I do think it's interesting, particularly when you think about the opening shot. Dion and Cher are like matching in the beginning, other than Dion has her hat, her very iconic hat. And
her iconic hats. She had several of them.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the first one because, it reminds me of like a church hat, like a church lady would wear it.
Yeah.
but they match. And then it's interesting because it sort of shows that, like, I think it's supposed to show you like a surface vision of them, right? Like they are very alike. They are both like, you know, these two ditzy teens. And then it starts to sort of veer away from each other to kind of show that, like, yeah, because Cher's wardrobe stays the same for a while and it does slowly change over the movie, like to reflect her changing character. But for the first like half of the movie, she mostly wears clothes that are reminiscent of like a school uniform. But Dion is not doing that and does so even less so as the movie goes on as well.
Cher's parallel with her own dad, I think, is present in the costume choice because she does kind of start out with like, there's a business cash vibe. You would definitely not call it business casual, but it's sort of like that little, you know, button down cardigan over a shirt type thing. It's business casual themed.
I mean, I guess that is a different interpretation than I had of it. Because I was thinking, like, even though she clearly goes to a public school, it's almost like she's saying she's too good for it by wearing things that are akin to a school uniform that you would wear at, like, a private school.
Professional looking. It's not professional looking, but it has that sort of...
Yeah. And I love Dion's, like, bohemian look for the... for the highway scene.
Yes.
The clothes are just like really incredible and have had like, I would say like a lasting impact on like cultural ideas about clothes.
I couldn't watch the movie without thinking of Iggy Azalea.
Why? Oh, because she did that song or the video.
Yeah, her outfit was basically a remake of Cher's first outfit.
The yellow one?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it is interesting, I think, the way they use clothes to change, because her clothing does start to change. Like, it remains preppy. Like, there's no way around that. She's still who she is, right? But it does seem to be a little more toned down, a little less uniformy. Yeah. And then if you think about like the character of Josh, he's kind of schlubby most of the time. He wears like graphic t-shirts. Also, I just want to mention Christian's like retro style, very James Dean. Yeah. But Josh at one point has a goatee and is reading Nietzsche, which like...
Such a loser.
I just was like, this is a weird turn. Like, is it supposed to represent that for some reason right now he ain't feeling great?
It felt like a joke to me.
Yeah.
It almost felt like we were looking at him through the Cher filter. Like, of a characterized, just fucking college dork. I almost don't think that was intended literally, because I remember exactly the scene that you were talking about, because when I saw it, I was like, that's funny to me. Like, he's just sitting there with his sunglasses on, sitting, I think, on a pool chair. And the lead up to that shot is she's like, I need some dumbass fool to use. Where can I find one? Bam, there he is reading Nietzsche by the pool with his weird goatee.
I feel that. I've just randomly changed my facial hairstyle basically for no reason or just, out of the blue. So I get that. Of course, there's a reason in the movie why I did that particular style and everything, but just changing your facial hair on a whim is a understandable thing. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I mean, in normal life, sure. But like, I feel like there has to be a purpose for things, all things ideally, but like, obviously you might miss details. However, this seemed weirdly deliberate. And yet I don't know if it meant anything because there was nothing really behind it.
Right. It was just like excuses to make fun of him.
Or maybe that was the filmmakers like saying there's no deliberate meaning behind certain things. Maybe they decided to have him change his facial hairstyle.
Nietzsche.
There you go.
Full circle. Hey guys, I want to talk about Travis. This is the worst segue. I was
going to ask, how bad am I for liking and feeling like really bad for Travis?
I want to marry him.
At the very end, you find out his last name is Birkenstock, which was so funny. It was...
They were calling him Birkenstock throughout the entire movie. The teacher called him...
I thought that was like them making fun of him.
I mean, it might have been, but it was immediate. Like the teacher, I can't remember the teacher's name. Yeah, Mr. So-and-so called him Birkenstock from the beginning. And
but like, that would be a funny joke, right? But then when he's in the skating competition, they outright say that is his last name, that his name is Travis Birkenstock. It was so funny.
Oh, Travis Birkenstock.
Yeah, when you just say Birkenstock on its own, it's for some weird reason for me in my brain, it's sort of easy to be like, okay, cool, whatever. But when you say Travis Birkenstock, you're like, haha, dumb. Travis is the real hero.
Yeah, he is the coolest, not by kind of like calmest, but also radical in the whole movie.
And also, he was so into Ty, like literally falling over people, jumping over people, throwing himself over the bodies of other people in order to like, are you okay? Like, are you good? Are you cool? Like, he was supposed to be like the trash guy who we were all supposed to know was right for Ty from the get-go. And yeah, they did it okay. They did it okay with that character.
Yeah, and I think like one of the big things about her showing Cher's kind of change in personality has to do with, of course, that situation, right? Ty and Travis.
Can I say my favorite part of that movie? And I'm going to use the word whiplash again. There was a scene not like maybe 3 minutes before the Valley party scene where Cher sort of like tears Ty's ass for talking about using drugs. She was like, you know, what are you, some kind of idiot? Like, how old are you? I think is what she says. And then they go to the party. And Travis spills something on Cher's shoes. And he is immediately like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me bust out that chronic. And Cher's words, Alicia Silverstone does not make eye contact with, what is his name? Something Mayer.
Breckenmeyer.
They do not make eye contact, those two actors. She says, while fussing over her messed up shoes, she says, that's the least you could do. And I'm sitting here thinking, she's misunderstood him. The funny joke is about to be, he's going to whip this joint out and she's going to be like, how dare you? She took it and hit it. And I was like, yeah, thank you. Bravo. Yay. But also, what the hell happened 5 minutes ago?
She also said to Ty, getting, however you should put it, buzzed, whatever, at a party is okay, but you don't want to be zonked out all day. So she's okay with drugs, just, not doing it at or before school.
Specifically recreationally. Thank you for
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I did not. I was just like, why the hell is she chewing Ty's ass and then hitting it at the party?
Yeah.
I thought that interaction between those two actors, like on a meta level, was so funny.
Well, and the thing is, like, sometimes the movie has these parts where they're very good, but there's so much in between that. It's kind of a mess.
Were any guys also like sort of jarred by it was about the first 15 minutes. I was very, very annoyed by the delivery of every actor's lines. But like right at the 15-minute mark, I think I got used to it because it was so consistent. But I just really felt like their lines were almost too dialed in.
Are you saying it more like the performance or like the way they said it?
It was almost a mix of writing and also the actor's delivery of the dialogue.
So that would be direction or lack thereof.
Well, but it was consistent. It was consistent through the whole movie.
Direction.
Almost everybody had a weird cadence. Like,
so odd direction.
I think the cadence a lot of times is supposed to be that sort of ditzy Californian, you know?
Maybe that's it. But I almost felt like I was watching a dub. Like it had been dubbed over, but it wasn't.
I mean, it might have been ADR'd, and that might have been a problem for you that you caught it.
What was this weird thing that Paul Rudd was doing with not his voice? It was almost like it was a very weird vocal affectation that Paul Rudd was doing where he almost had kind of like a very slight vaudeville radio guy accent. Am I the only one that interpreted that?
Are you just talking about California accents?
You know what? Maybe I'm learning something today.
Have you ever seen that SNL sketch, The Californians?
No.
Okay, you've got to watch it because it makes fun of California accents, basically.
Yeah,
what are you doing?
He didn't sound like this in every Ant-Man movie. Like he had this weird, it was almost like he was squeezing his larynx and kind of talking like this. Like this weird sort of FDR type.
I mean, also he was a lot younger, earlier in his career, have so much experience under his belt. So maybe I didn't notice anything really that odd.
I mean, he looks the same, but
yeah.
He's a vampire wizard, I swear to God.
Fuck.
Yeah.
We were talking about Travis because there is so much more about Travis that I want to gush over, particularly, and this is sort of a combo of Travis and the teacher, Mr. Hall. Is that what you said his name was?
Yep.
Another beautiful scene I loved was when Mr. Hall is talking about their tardies pretty early on in the movie. And Travis sort of like takes the podium and is like, I couldn't make these tardies without you. And if you look at Mr. Hall during his whole speech,
who was played by Wallace Shawn.
Wallace Shawn, very, very, very recognizable.
Inconceivable.
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 Yeah, he's just looking at Travis like, what? Like, is this fool really taking this as an opportunity to grandstand? But he didn't stop him. I liked the teacher character a whole lot, too. He was a type of teacher character that you don't really get to see in these 90s movies that was sort of like, yeah, I'll let you be a weird asshole. That's fine. But you're gonna face consequences. Like, natural consequences are going to happen. And no, you cannot use your cuteness to dissuade me.
Just your matchmaking skills.
Yeah, you can go behind my back and get me laid, and I won't know any better, but I am not going to willingly, like, change your grade just because you convinced me. Like, I'll let you act like a weirdo. Totally fine. But you're getting a C. Sorry. He's the gentle parent of the 1990s.
It's interesting because, like, Travis is kind of stereotype that most people like, which is why he ends up being kind of he has to be likable, right? Like, that's the point. But they did choose a stereotype that is generally likable on purpose, I think. And one that made it so that someone who is like rich and snotty would look down on.
He's a Shaggy.
Also, he was going to a Beverly Hills high school. So, like, they're all rich. Like, clearly everyone in that school is rich, right? It means you live in Beverly Hills, so...
At least, upper middle class, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not super familiar with California and the areas of California, but my understanding is that Beverly Hills is a very rich neighborhood.
Yeah. Not familiar with it either, but if movies and shows have taught me anything, yeah.
Right. Initially in my notes, I wrote down like, oh, she's mad about a C. That means she must be quite good in school. And then they reveal that she has just charmed her way into getting good grades half of the time. So I was like, oh, never mind.
True child of a lawyer.
Right.
Right. That goes back to the whole parallel of her and her dad, which I did kind of like. She was using the language that she hears from her father to... She was smart. She was very, very smart. She just wasn't using it in a way that was...
Exactly.
That was being, standardized.
Or in a way that was kind. She thought she was.
Instead of working on her studies, she would rather think up ways to get out of studying and get by with just her words.
Yeah. She was charming and she was like wily or like rather than like interested in book smart type of things.
Right.
Now, one of the reasons, and I remember this as a kid, as I said before, I avoided this movie like the plague. Like, I did not want to see this movie because I knew, like, from the trailers, from the previews, I was like, this chick is going to be manipulative. What was refreshing to me was that she was not at any point, I don't think, she was not overtly, I will say, sexually manipulative. I was worried in the beginning of this movie. I was like, oh, please don't try anything crazy with the teacher. And I was relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. Whew. She did do some...
Well, in fact, I'd say she's the opposite, right?
Correct. Yes. Breath of fresh air. I'm okay, I guess is what I'm trying to say, with a manipulative, like conventionally attractive teenage girl being manipulative in a non-sexual way. When it becomes sexual, I'm just sort of like, oh, this is played. I'm done. Like,
I was kind of annoyed, though, when she was manipulative. When, bring it back to Travis, she was the reason why he and Ty weren't together the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did. She actively hindered that relationship. She steered her clear of Travis the entire movie. And she actually ended up paying price for it, getting macked on by Captain Date Rape. And then I don't know what the hell was the point of the whole mugging scene.
I don't honestly either. If I'm being honest, like
These things happen.
Yeah,
These
but
things
especially in the valley. No, I don't know if it was only for this like one part at the end ish, sort of near the end, where when Ty has a quote unquote near death experience and everyone's asking her about it, that she also has had one, but no one wants to hear about it, you know?
Mm. See, the movie didn't give me that. You did. Did the movie give us that and I just didn't pick up on it?
It's one line though.
It did. Right.
Yeah. So if you missed it, that's not.
Plus, as the viewers, we witnessed it. So we know that she had, if you keep in your mind, you know that she did have an actual near-death experience. And Ty had a kind of, sort of, almost, quote-unquote, near-death experience.
I mean, I could say that they're equally scary, right? Like, because you don't know, like the two instances, there are people that these two girls don't know. So you don't know what they're capable of, right?
Okay, so you guys caught on to it. For me, however, this would have taken like a very, very simple line, like a few words just to say like, well, everyone's gushing over her weird ass, inexplicable near-death experience that I don't understand. But also I had the same thing when I was held at gunpoint. Like I needed a little tie-in for that. And maybe that's just me.
She does say that. So somebody's asking her about... Yeah. Somebody has, like, it's like a game of telephone where they're like, oh my God, did you hear about Ty being shot at? And she's like, that's not what happened. And she's like, then she goes and sits down and Ty is talking about, like, what happens before you die? And she goes to say, like, oh, when I got mugged, it was so scary. And people were like, yeah, let's talk to Ty.
All right. Rescinded.
But like I said, it's one line. So if you miss it, you miss it completely.
I missed it.
Also, about that, I know you said that you feel like they're equal in, I guess, in ways, but she had an actual gun to her. If she didn't give him the money, she probably would have actually gotten shot. Those guys were, I mean, yes, it could have been bad, but they were kind of just messing with her.
Fucking around.
And she was just, they were on the second floor. If she fell, there's a chance she could have died, yeah, sure, but not very likely. But when Cher was getting mugged, if the dude didn't like her response and he shot her, there's a very good chance she could die.
I'll say I understand where you're coming from. I just think, like, for me, it's like if someone's cruel enough to think that that prank is cute and funny, like, are they really not cruel enough to, like, actually hurt someone in some way? You know what I mean? I don't know.
I think it's an intent thing. I don't know. The brain interprets near death the same way, regardless. That's a whole other conversation that is not within the scope of this podcast.
Well, I think part of it, too, was, so it happened at the mall, and they implied that people hang out at the mall. So it seems like Ty's was more public, and it is very possible, like, other kids from her school had actually witnessed it. You know what I mean? The thing with Ty over the mall.
As opposed to Cher's experience, which was kind of private, and she didn't say anything about it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder because of that scene, like, did she say anything at all before then? Because it doesn't, I don't recall that happening. Like her, other than I think she talks to Josh and about it when he picks her.
She called him to come get her.
I was frustrated by that scene because I was, throughout the whole movie, kind of going, what the fuck was the point of this?
I would say it's very likely that it was sort of to get her and Josh more close, because until then, I would say they were kind of like a little bit snippy with each other. Like their relationship is like slightly combative, actually pretty combative at the beginning, and less so as it goes on. But I'm assuming that was the big thing. But it doesn't matter, because either way, she could have called it and been like, I'm stranded, and that still serves the same purpose.
I'm stranded, and also I got mugged.
Yeah.
I got the shakedown.
Unless they also wanted her to like not have any money, so she couldn't like get a cab. I don't know.
Maybe they have too simplistic of a view sometimes, but again, I gotta say, like, maybe they're writers. Writing is not, well, for people who are not creative like me, writing is not really easy. So maybe sometimes they come up with some things and they just don't get rid of it because it's the thing you put in the movie, so they put it in.
Sometimes writing is bad.
Yeah, like I'll say like I think that these are the reasons. Was it done skillfully? I think no.
We are looking for purpose in this movie, and there is none. Sometimes there
There
just
we go.
is none.
What about
We
none?
have
But
to.
I think that's you guys' issue. A lot of you guys' issue with this
yeah,
movie.
I mean, plus all the problematic stuff.
No, fuck the problematic. I want a meaningful resolution. I want to be told. I want my hand to be held. And at the end of the movie, I want someone to say, this is what the fuck Sucker Punch was about.
Okay.
I'm looking for the same thing with Clueless. Why is it this deep? What happened?
It is a teen movie, and teen movies aren't generally that deep.
No.
I mean, that's kind of the reason why the studio eventually made not another teen movie, making fun of all the tropes without any real big meaning behind it. And they even played on the quote unquote meaning that are in the other teen movies, like the whole airport scene.
I have never seen that movie.
Sorry.
Oh,
We'll do
my
that.
bad.
So I will say, like, I think there is benefit in certain ways to retelling stories. Like, I don't love everything being remakes, obviously. It gets tiring in a certain way, but there is some benefit, especially when you're going to change it to a, like, modern lens. And I know that when people do like Shakespeare retellings, a la like 10 Things I Hate About You, that people complain, except for most of these things that are currently popular and are considered classics, for a lot of them, they are for the masses, right? They were not considered high art at the time that they came out. So it's not that different that when you are remaking it to make it a little kind of for the masses, quote unquote, and not high art and not pretentious in a way, if that makes sense.
Yes, that was my point. Just I said it in a different way, I guess, but that's kind of my point. It's a popcorn movie. You go to movies, you eat your popcorn, watch what's on the screen, and then you laugh and stuff at the jokes, and then you go home afterwards and, hey, you know that movie? Yeah, that. It's not really about what was the deep meaning? What meaning? Wow.
Well, there is some meaning. I don't think there's no meaning at all. Is
this a trend with modern filmmaking where they tend to like over hold hand and just like really walk you up to the point? Like, have I grown?
Yeah, I feel like it is a bit of a modern filmmaker thing.
Hold on. Have you guys ever seen Clerks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or pretty much any Kevin Smith movie?
Yes.
Okay. So Kevin Smith movies are notoriously just like characters shooting the fucking shit. They're just in one location and there's a lot of dialogue back and forth. It means nothing, but it's still...
And everyone loves them kind of for that reason.
Yeah, because he's doing it right. Like, the difference between Clerks and Clueless is in Clueless, we were doing 1 million things at once. We were at the Valley Party. We were smoking weed. We were at the mall getting dangled over the ledge. We were at the skate park skating and all this crazy bullshit. We were manipulating our teachers. It's just boom, boom, boom all over the place. With Clerks, it was like they're in the gas station. They're shooting the shit. Like, I wasn't led to expect anything with Clerks. I'm just using Clerks as a blanket example.
Yeah.
I wasn't, maybe it's just me, but I wasn't led to think there's anything deeper in this movie because the title of the movie is Clueless. And it starts out with these two clueless high school girls.
I don't think that there's no depth to this movie at all. I do think there is an interesting... It is clearly supposed to be satirical, right? That is where the depth would come, right? However, I think because of the lens we are looking through it now about stereotypes, and some of these things were really problematic, that like it does hurt some of that as well. Because satire is meant to be making comment about something. And I would argue that in this case, it was more about like particularly like rich people, honestly, and kind of skewering them. Like I said, I don't know how successful it really is in its satire, honestly.
Wait, I just had an epiphany. Clueless took me to all of these places. I was so tired. And Clueless took me to the Valley Party, and it showed me people throwing up in the pool. And there was so much effort to impress boys, so much effort to impress boys. And then it took me to manipulating my teachers and going to a skate park and so on and so forth. And I got nothing out of it. Okay. Then Clerks had me. I'm sorry, I keep going back to Clerks. Clerks sat my ass at a gas station and we just shot the shit. And I was like, oh, this means something. It's because I'm old.
Well, I'm gonna.
I was so exhausted by Clueless, and I'm like, what? We hung out all night, Clueless. We hung out all night. I've got to go to bed, Clueless. Please stop.
I give you a little bit of a counterpoint.
Please.
I don't think Clerks is supposed to be satirizing anything. That's the first thing. But the other thing is that it is also, while it is a comedy, is more of a character study than I would say Clueless is meant to be, which I think is also kind of the difference. As problematic as they both are, they are attempting different things as well, which might also...
I kind of feel that if you really look at anything that is intended to be comedic from the 1990s and before, it's going to be kind of problematic.
Yeah.
Oh, watch Ventura.
Because those are things that were funny in that time period.
Can you believe it?
Well, it is partly because of media. Because of the internet, we are able to connect with everyone. So everyone is visible now. Like every kind of person is visible in a way that I don't think was the case. Like that is the thing about like movies and television is they exclusively dominated the kind of people we saw outside of our direct environment. And because so many movies were about cis, straight, white people, everything was through the lens of that. And like now that we are in the internet age and you can have experiences with people or like see the visibility of various people, things are a little more thoughtful, I guess.
We care more.
Yeah.
I do want to go on the record as saying I do not think that Clerks is unproblematic.
Yeah.
I was just using it as an example of like just a chill ass movie where people stay in one spot and nothing the fuck happens. But yes, Basil, I absolutely agree with you. We are now seeing the people that are being alienated rather than just the people being alienated keeping it the fuck to themselves and no one hearing or knowing about it.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely great. We need that.
For sure. It is part of the reason people have said that like people in cities are often more kind of leftist liberal because they have more exposure to people unlike themselves.
Yeah, I believe it.
I did want to talk a little bit about Christian.
Who?
James Dean.
I know.
It's really like that's the thing because everyone's stereotypes. There's some stereotypes. But they couldn't go too hard on him, I feel like, because otherwise Cher would know, right? So they had to make it at least slightly more subtle than a lot of the other kind of stereotype stuff. And like, she is literally clueless in love because she can't tell that Christian is gay and she can't tell that Elton is clearly in love with her. He keeps kissing her on the head and the cheek and like hugging her like a ton before that. Those are clearly supposed to be signs of her being inexperienced in love. But back to Christian, like, it's interesting because, like, you could tell they are trying to do something with stereotypes like they are with everybody, but they can't be too obvious about it.
This movie exhausted me.
I will tell you that I, at one point, really did like this movie. From this angle and this time in my life and this time in history, I don't really care for it as much. Anything anyone else wants to say?
And I was probably not a popular opinion, but I was kind of disappointed that they didn't go further with the whole teacher's romantic thing. I mean, show it a little more. I mean, it's not important to the movie, of course, but...
At least in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I did sort of think that it was going to play a bigger part than it did. It was just like, this happened. When I read the summary, basically just read the Wikipedia rundown of Emma, it made sense to me. It was just sort of like, this is a thing that happened that made Cher think that she would be good at blah, blah, blah. Like, it made sense why they...
Understand that.
Yeah.
I just want more of it.
If I didn't know that, yeah, for sure, which I didn't when I started watching the movie. I did not know that. And I was sort of disappointed. I was like, that was fast. It was quick. Because we're just going to drop off.
A little like some of the stuff we talked about before, where they'll spend like a lot of time on something that seems like it's going to be important and then just isn't, or it's not even a lot of time. It's like emphasis. There seems to be emphasis that makes it appear like it will be important. Like these are things that are the opposite of Chekhov's gun, honestly, where they're like, here's a thing, doesn't matter.
Yes, and that's killing me.
Yeah, that happens a lot. So in Emma, they took a couple that basically at the beginning, Emma's governess is getting married and she had made them. And that is sort of the catalyst to her continuing to do that, just as in here. But I would argue that the governess character gets split between the teacher and Dion, because she is essentially her kind of friend throughout, sort of. She's obviously a little bit older, but she is sort of a confidant kind of thing. So I think they ended up splitting it because they were very likely going to say, like, having a teacher as your confidant and like a helper and whatever is not a great idea. But they couldn't have like Dion getting married, right? Because she's 15. But like instead, it almost seems like made a match between like Murray and Dion and just eliminated that first part with the teachers.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And they could have made Murray more, I don't know.
More of a character, like a... I mean, I would argue that most of the characters are not much of a character, right? Like they come in, they come out, they come in, they come out. Cher is technically our main character. So like a majority of what we're seeing
even
is with
she
her.
Sometimes, especially towards the end, I'm just like, in the beginning, you were so cute and endearing and I loved your sassiness. Then when she gets existential at the end, like when she starts trying so hard and it's all to impress other people, I just got exhausted with this movie, like physically.
Yeah.
This is nostalgia for me.
Yeah, we could wrap up and do that. If you want to do your wrap up, say yes or no.
Okay, we did Nim last time, and that was a movie that I had very fuzzy memories about, even though I had seen it multiple times. I didn't understand it when I watched it. And when I watched it as an adult, I understood even more, and it was made even better. It was an even better experience. This is sort of the opposite. Saw it once. I remember kind of really liking it. However, on the second pass, I'm over-intellectualizing this movie, and I know I am. And I think that's kind of what Drew is trying to say, maybe. Yeah, I'm way, way, way over-intellectualizing this movie, and I'm going to say no on it. It's got some yes moments.
Drew, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm going to say Yestalgia. I liked it. I didn't overanalyze it. Took it for what it was. But who knows? Maybe I'm a little bit clueless myself, Yeah, I liked it. Yestalgia.
Okay. I would say like a nostalgia in a couple senses, in that it is really problematic. So you got to be prepared for that. And on the other hand, like, yeah, it's not as entertaining as I recalled or as funny as I recalled, right? But it's a Yestalgia in the terms of like, this was such a cultural zeitgeist, like juggernaut, And so in a way, I feel like Yestalgia, because to say that you have watched it, if that makes sense, or to understand other kind of referential things, and if only because like the clothes are awesome. I love the clothes. I wish I had some of them. Maybe I will make some at some point.
I feel like we can find better.
Yeah, it is a certain kind of clothing too. It is not like a gorgeous...
No, not clothing. I mean, the movie. No, the clothing is top notch. I agree with you on that.
Well, here's what I'll say. I'm going to give it a very soft Yestalgia.
I'm not disagreeing with that. There's definitely better movies, but I did like this one. This wasn't bad, in my opinion. When you don't try to make it into Hannibal or
Citizen Kane.
Yeah, Citizen Kane or anything like that, then yeah, just kind of shut off your brain and go with the ride. It's good. Yeah. But if you're actually trying to think about it and like trying to find some meaning, then you're not going to have that great time. Luckily, I'm pretty good at doing that.
So I think right now if you were to average it, it's a soft Yestalgia, sort of half Yestalgia. I don't know. Anyhow, yeah, that is basically our chat about Clueless.
I will piss on it to put out a fire.
If you would like to talk about a piece of media that you're really digging right now, I would love to do that.
Let's do it.
Does anyone have one at the outset that they can think of?
Okay, I'll start. To continue last episode, I watched the end of Attack on Titan.
Yeah?
Oh, is it done?
Yeah, it's done. But done.
Okay.
So there's that.
Who got married?
What?
I was being funny.
A lot of people die.
Married.
Those are the two things that happen at the end of things. People get married or people die.
And adopt baby.
I will say mine is a little bit like you guys' in which it's not something new, but I've been rewatching Stranger Things from the very beginning. And I would recommend, if you've watched it before and only once before, to watch it again because, like, it's pretty good. Like, the second season is as weak as it always was, but yeah, it's fun to experience it again. And it's particularly interesting to see them like grow up because they were so young at the outset. And then the book I've been reading, I haven't finished it, so I can't say 100%, but I'm reading The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I would generally recommend her as an author. She's awesome. So yeah, that's my things that I am currently consuming.
I can't stand you guys. Number one, first season of Stranger Things scared me so bad I had to sleep with a light on the first time that I ever watched it. I would stay up until like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, binging the hell out of that shit. And then I wouldn't sleep the whole rest of the night until the sun came up because that monster scared the fuck out of me. I seriously envisioned it coming out of my wall. Then season 2 happened and I was completely cured. Anyways, going off on a tangent. So I have a fresh 3-year-old, so I, again, don't get to watch anything that is not animated or puppeteered. I tried, actually, to watch Clueless. I thought I was going to have Secret of NIMH luck with her. He just sort of like, she was engaged completely with NIMH from start to finish. Not so much with Clueless. By minute 15, she was like, turn this off. I don't want to watch this. And I said, yes, Queen.
Mommy, this is dumb.
And I did her bidding. So, I mean, I'm a man without an island here. I've been watching Baby Shark Big Show. This is an accomplishment for me because if anyone with children who might be out there listening might know, Baby Shark is unbearable. Baby Shark Big Show is at least bearable. It's written for quote unquote big kids. So yeah, it's at least slightly more coherent. But yeah, that's about all I've been allowed at the moment. Someday my answers to these questions will be getting better.
That's fine. If there is someone else with kids, they might, especially if you find something new. You should watch Nanoland. Anyways, this has been the Yestalgia podcast. And we will hopefully see you next time.
To the flip side, dudes.